Israel has struck Iran. Explosions were heard, including in Tehran. According to Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz, the country has launched a preemptive military operation against Iran. The goal is to neutralize a potential threat from Tehran, as well as to prevent possible strikes on Israel. According to Iranian media, about 30 targets across Iran were attacked, including the president's residence and the intelligence headquarters. At the same time, Israel declared a state of emergency in case of retaliatory strikes. According to CNN, the Israeli strike on Iran was coordinated by the United States of America. Earlier, Donald Trump stated that he had to make an important decision regarding Iran after diplomatic efforts failed to yield the desired result. During the latest round of negotiations, Iran rejected the U.S. proposal to reduce the country's main capabilities. This included uranium enrichment and the transfer of its stockpiles. Abroad, war between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Reports indicate an Afghan attack on a Pakistani nuclear facility and military base. Media report casualties and injuries, with the exact numbers still being clarified. Last night, Pakistani authorities carried out strikes on areas of Afghanistan and its capital. They described this as retaliation for the Afghan attack carried out the previous day. The Pakistanis named the Taliban movement as their target. It is accused of a series of attacks against their own country. In turn, the Afghan authorities, who themselves are representatives of the Taliban, have launched an offensive operation and blame Pakistan for the escalation. Both sides provide different figures regarding the dead and wounded. Pakistan claims that during the attack they eliminated more than 70 Afghan Taliban militants. The opposing side states that only 8 people were killed. These figures cannot currently be verified by independent media sources. A fragile truce has prevailed between Afghanistan and Pakistan since last October. It was reached through the mediation of Qatar and Turkey after a wave of the bloodiest border conflicts between these countries in recent years. Iran has rejected American proposals regarding its nuclear program. Negotiations with representatives of the United States, which were held the day before in Geneva, ended without the signing of an agreement. Tehran did not agree to Washington's proposals to destroy its 3 main nuclear facilities and to hand over all of its stockpile of enriched uranium to the United States. Trump's representatives also insisted that the agreement with the United States be indefinite, unlike the arrangements reached by previous presidents. Despite the fact that the agreement was not signed, both sides stated that there was some progress in the negotiations, so the meetings may continue later in Vienna. President Trump is pressuring Iran to abandon its nuclear program, and he has been doing so for quite some time. He is threatening military action and has sent the
massive nuclear-powered aircraft carriers that were deployed directly to the Persian Gulf. But how could this entire situation finally come to an end? What kind of official statements will we eventually receive from them? What is also interesting is, why was it important for Iran to change the venue? Why are the negotiations taking place in the format that they are? Why aren't the parties sitting at the table together? Why are they passing their comments through Omani diplomats? Could you explain to us in general, perhaps, all these nuances, all these details? Right now, the situation
around Iran is so important. We're talking about regime change, a radical change of regime, about the possibility that this entire regime, which emerged in the 1980s, could come to an end. And after that, there could be a situation where Iran becomes a completely different country, one that is hard to recognize. And since there are so many interests involved in this, and to a large extent, many countries would not want such a change because they fear a strong Iran, because they are afraid that it will surge ahead. After all, the Ayatollah regime keeps this country in the Middle Ages, a large country with vast resources, an ancient civilization that has maintained its statehood for the last 2,000 years in various forms with different political and religious systems. And now, once again, there is such an epochal change. The world itself stands on the threshold, facing such reflections, so to speak, from an external perspective. When considering the current situation of the Ayatollah regime, they are desperately attempting to ensure their own survival. And they fully understand that the forthcoming military strikes, which could potentially come from the United States, Israel, and possibly some other allied countries, might be specifically designed with the ultimate goal of forcing a complete change of the regime. Yes, either to actively push these significant changes forward, which would inevitably trigger major and far-reaching transformations, or simply to thoroughly and completely eliminate Iran's entire missile and nuclear program. In fact, many countries are interested in this. Iran is entering a period of historical turbulence, so it's better that there is neither uranium nor missiles there. They basically have almost none. Personally, I doubt that Iran currently has the potential to resume its nuclear program, but some remnants remain. Not everything has been destroyed, and the same goes for the missile program. Not everything has been eliminated. That's why there is this kind of hesitation, very similar to that when the US was already prepared to carry out such a strike that would trigger not just military changes, but also set off political changes or accelerate political changes in Iran, a factor intervened, possibly Russian, possibly some other factor intervened. And the US was offered, well, let Iran declare something it has never declared before, that it voluntarily renounces its nuclear program, and then the US would refrain from carrying out strikes. So these negotiations, the attempt by the Ayatollahs themselves and their political partners in other countries to preserve this regime, that's why the Ayatollahs only want to talk about nuclear weapons, something they practically no longer possess. They are probably ready to give that up. To say that this will no longer exist entirely in its current form, or to allow qualified teams of international inspectors in. But they are not yet ready to discuss complex politics, including the activities of various Iranian proxies operating abroad, which have also been destroyed on many different levels. Still, their extensive international networks remain firmly in place, and they simply do not want to discuss them at this time. Any political changes, any political format. So, only the nuclear program. And moreover, in such a place, in such a country that would like to demonstrate the preservation of these regimes and the ATO, confidence in Turkey, there are already other views on what should happen inside Iran itself or in its Azerbaijani part. And Qatar, well, it's known that the Arab countries do not want these strikes. They are afraid that the changes that will begin in Iran after this will be very turbulent and not in the interests of the Arab countries. That's why such a place was chosen. I think for these reasons and for this kind of discussion. It was chosen only by Iran. They are only willing to talk about their nuclear weapons, which they are ready to give up. But when it comes to politics, regime change, or changing Iran's international status, they are not willing to discuss it, because all these conversations lead to changing the current regime there.
Alexei, here's something else interesting. As for the relations between the Russian Federation and Iran, I have to consider them as the Russian Federation does have some allies, some relations with Tehran. There was an interesting recent investigation by The Telegraph. They uncovered the secret routes by which money from the Russian Federation was brought directly, as they say, in bulk to Tehran. Tons of banknotes were transported by trains and ships. And just in one instance, a Russian bank delivered cash shipments over a period of 4 months for a total amount of about $2.5 billion. Incredible sums of money, unbelievable injections from the Russian Federation into its ally partner, if that's the right way to put it. How do you assess the influence of the Russian Federation on Iran, especially now in terms of supporting the regime? And in your opinion, what could this lead to in the future? Should I assume that this kind of relationship will continue, or will, let's say, the American side still have more influence on certain individuals, perhaps in the morning, I don't know. How does America plan to build these relations from its side? But I'm more interested in Russia, its relations and investments, the financing of this regime. I
Especially hope that there is no financing of the regime going on there. It is quite possible that this represents a form of financial compensation for various outstanding deliveries or formal contracts that were established during those historical periods when the nation of Iran held a significantly more robust and influential position on the global stage. Maybe it's even for old Shaheeds, some payments, or for, after all, from Iran, there are partial deliveries of oil, partial deliveries of gas through some swap schemes for Russia. Maybe there's something there. Or if this is really an injection, then it's more likely an injection of Chinese money into the Iranian regime. The one who truly has the resources to support Iran but doesn't want to do it publicly is China. Russia doesn't have the resources to support Iran, just as it didn't have the resources to support the Venezuelan regime, but it does have the desire, because for Russian domestic opinion is very important not to lose this. It's the idea that Russia has friends, partners who together with it can change the world. Countries like Venezuela, Iran, North Korea. Now we see that when regimes change, Syria was just recently among them, and all these collapses really harm the Russian authorities because it's hard for them to explain where their power is, where their loud roar and heavy fist are, with which they used to impress even the USA, saying they were together with Venezuela, Iran, North Korea as it was. They'll strike, they'll hit, but it turns out they can't stop this, but they really need this. Working to save the Iranian Ayatollahs from regime collapse is important for Russia's domestic politics. But since it can't do anything, I think that everything they are doing is helping China and carrying out the part of the public work to save these Ayatollahs that others don't want to do. Taking on China because it wouldn't want to get too deeply involved in this, although planes from China also fly to Iran just as openly with unknown cargo. So, plus, I think that what is happening now between Russia and Iran could be an attempt to cover their tracks. After all, Russia, I think it violated both the nuclear program and the missile program. Furthermore, there were documented shipments and deliveries of items that were prohibited under the existing nuclear weapons and missile technology control regime. Therefore, I do not rule out that these episodes, when something is being taken out, something is being exported, are also about removing evidence of excessive Russian involvement against Iran's nuclear program.
Yes, absolutely. It is also worth noting that Russian officials often declare how friendly they are with Iran, how they support this country, how wonderful their relations are. There is only an understanding on this matter and no further assistance beyond that. That was a small remark. Thank you, Alexei, for your explanations. Alexei Jacques, head of department at the National Institute for Strategic Studies, was in touch with the Frina studio